We are in the book of Judges, and we are poised to begin chapter 13, but I am going to pause and address something else before we get into chapter 13. I put in overspeed there last week for a couple of reasons. For one, there is a repetitive element of the book of Judges with the turning from God, the deliverance being brought about, the spiraling deterioration, both the people and the character of the judges, no doubt, is a part of that story as well. The other reason is that the 14th of September, which I think gives us 3 more Wednesdays yet, Corey and I are going to be changing classes. And so I was trying to make sure I got through the book of Judges before that time. However, he mentioned to me Sunday, he said, hey, I'll just pick up where you end. So if we're not done with the book of Judges, he'll finish the book of Judges at that time. So that was one reason for it. And like I said, the other reason was the repetitiveness. But at the end of class, and Ernie said to me at the end of our devotional after class, he said, Mike, you didn't deal with it. You skipped over it. And now I don't know the answer, or something like that. He was giving me a hard time. I said, what don't you know the answer to, Ernie? He said, did he or did he not kill her? How many of you know what he's talking about? Rita knows, Sharon knows. Is that a question on anyone? Well, on your two's mind. So, always wondered. You're still going to wonder after tonight. And so what we're talking about is Jephthah. And Jephthah was the last judge before Samson here. And I guess that's not accurate either. He was in chapter 11 anyhow, as well as chapter, get this straight, he was in chapter 11. And Jephthah was a little bit of, he had some problems, like we've been talking about these judges and the deliverers deteriorating. So Jephthah is chosen to lead the people in battle, and he makes God a promise. What's the promise he makes?
Tonight. The first thing to meet him when he comes out of his house, when he comes back, he'll sacrifice to the Lord.
Yes, so this is chapter 11, Judges 11, starting in verse 29. He says that he will give or offer the first thing to the Lord. Verse 29, we'll just start there so that we're accurate with the details. Then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Amorites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Amorites into my hand, then whatsoever comes out from the door of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the Amorites, shall be the Lord's, and I shall offer it for a burnt offering. So Jephthah crossed over to the Amorites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hands. So he makes his promise. Whatever comes out of the house, I will offer to the Lord. And then we have that descriptive phrase afterwards as a burnt offering. We'll address that in just a moment. Here's a question that we don't have a definitive answer to, but I'm curious what's in your minds. What did he expect to come out of his house and greet him? The dog. Jeff said, the dog. Very possible. I think that's the most logical. The poor Fido is going to pay the price here. So Any other ideas?
Probably his wife.
A couple say his wife. That's possible. I don't know what the options are, or if he's even thinking through this at all, if it's malicious. Let me ask you this question. This question we can answer definitively. Did God expect this of him? Did he expect him to make a vow of any sorts like this? No. He did not ask him to make a vow like this at all. This is just Jephthah offering this up. So, with that said, what comes out of his door? His daughter. Yep, his only child, his daughter, right, comes out to me. And in fact, his response was, "You have brought me low." 35. As soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low." I don't think his daughter had brought him low. Yeah, Jephthah threw himself, cast himself into a low position, no doubt. So, a rash vow, an inappropriate vow, a horrible turn. So here's the question. Did he kill her? He carried out his vow. So and that's 39. That we are certain of. He carries out his vow. Now, I asked, did God expect him to make that vow or ask that of him? The answer was a definitive no, absolutely not. Now, does God, were they required, and I forgot I only had, other than Judges, only had 4 passages. I had them on postcard and I forgot it. So it's either number 6, let's see what's in. Nope, that's a Nazirite vow. Is it Exodus 30 or Numbers 30? I apologize for forgetting my notes. I only had one little note. Nope, okay, I'm going to quit guessing. Here's what we know for sure, despite my lack of ability to turn to it, is the Israelites were expected to keep their vows, right? You make a vow to God, you keep it. Now, here's another question I have for you. No matter what the cost? Okay.
You had no choice really if you did.
Generally speaking, absolutely. No matter what the cost, though. No matter what.
You can't keep.
Don't make promises you don't keep. Here's what I'm getting at. Would have it been sinful to break his vow? Yeah, right? And that's what Jeff's getting at. That's what we're talking about, right? Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, they're expected to keep their vow. Is it sinful to murder? Yeah. That's why I pause there when and I hesitate when I say no matter what the cost, right? You make a vow that leads you into other sin, you know. So imagine this. Jephthah says to God, if you give this battle into my hands, when I get home, I'll commit adultery. Now, is it right or wrong for Jephthah to commit adultery? Wrong. So you're saying he shouldn't keep his vow? Shouldn't make that vow.
The 10 Commandments, the law was, and if you broke those, that was, you're out. I don't know.
As we're reasoning through, Jeff is showing some hesitation. I think justly so, right? We all should.
That is in November, Numbers 30.
It is Numbers 30?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Okay.
You said that was a descriptive term as a burnt offering.
Yes.
So is that added, or is that, I mean, could he have offered her as that she would live her life? It says she lived, she knew no man and became accustomed in Israel. So could
To lament her.
So it couldn't be that he offered her to live her life as a virgin for the rest of her life and sacrifice her life to God? Would that be, could it not mean kill her?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, for almost my entire life, I thought he killed her, right? And never saw any other options. And I still think that's a plausible, very plausible explanation here. He killed her, right? Now, my point with the whole adultery, isn't it interesting? We were okay with murder. Absolutely, you had to kill her. But adultery, wait, maybe you shouldn't do that. So my point is, though, what's right, he made a vow. If that vow leads to sin, there's sin there either way. It's sin to break the vow. It's sin to go through with the sinful vow, right? But I don't think we can count on Jephthah doing what was right. His whole character is contrary to that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Isn't that kind of an atonement that he offered a burnt sacrifice? I mean, he had something in mind, and why he said that comes out my door. The first,
Yeah.
maybe he meant from his stables or anything, and the house door opened first, and he was stuck to make a decision that he obviously didn't want to.
Yeah.
But for fear, but it's one of the commandments, so thou shalt not kill. Maybe he had an out that way.
Yeah.
If it was after the law was given to Moses, then he really could have learned out of it, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I think so. So, and I'm glad you brought that back up, Jeff, because I realized I didn't answer your question. I said that was a descriptive term. It is part of the inspired. It's in the manuscripts. There's no contradiction there. So it's his description to it. And I think that is a possibility as far as his mindset. He may be thinking house bigger than inside his house, right? His stable.
Fattened lamb or a cat, but not really, God didn't ask for that. But he did ask people to kill your offspring. Almost, kind of.
Yeah, Abraham is the lone example of that, which the illustration of that and the purpose of that is, this is what I'm going to do for you, right? God's going to provide the sacrifice. So he draws that distinction between the pagans of human sacrifice, which is what the two things throughout the book of Judges, Baal and Molech and Asherah, are the things that God's against, right? And he's addressing over and over again. So let me give a possible solution here, and then look at a little bit of evidence in the text to kind of wrap this up. So I meant to inject some thought and some questioning, which we've got. So now let's see if we can't bring this home. Do you remember after the people came out of Egypt, they were told to do something with everything that opens the womb first? That which comes out of the womb first. They had two options to do with it. Does anyone remember? It was dedicated to God. They had to either sacrifice it or purchase it, redeem it back to theirs. So you have a lamb, right? And the lamb is getting ready to have her first ewe ever. She has the ewe. I cannot keep it. I have to either sacrifice it to God, or I have to pay the temple in order to keep my first ewe. Now, there's great symbolism here. God had delivered them through the death of the firstborn. And he says, I spared yours, that hence the firstborn are mine. All the firstborn are mine. Except, if I say except, it was true of the firstborn son as well. But they did not have the option to sacrifice their son. They had to redeem him, make an offering instead. The point is, they were dedicated to God. But it didn't mean everything else got sacrificed. So I think it's perfectly plausible that Jephthah says a burnt offering, and if, the little lamb had run out, it would have been a burnt offering. But being that his daughter runs out, there's a different kind of dedication that takes place. Think about Samuel, right? Samuel was dedicated to God. In fact, along those lines, let me think real hard because I don't have my... let's go to 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter. 1 Samuel 2. I know I just referenced Samuel, so you think we're going to talk about Samuel, but we're not. That's the trick. 1 Samuel 2 and verse 22. Would someone read that for us?
Now Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance of the tent at meetings.
Okay, so Eli's old, and his sons, who were supposed to be the next priest, are wicked and awful in so many different ways. And the specific sin in this verse that we see is that they are sleeping with who? The women who are serving at the front gate of the tabernacle. Let's hope that if we turn back to Exodus 38, in verse 8, I'm in luck. After Rita bailed me out last time, I'm going to get these other passages. Exodus 38 and verse 8. He made the basin of bronze and its stand of bronze from the mirror of the ministering women who ministered in the entrance of the tent of meeting. So he made the basin of bronze from the mirrors of the ministering women who ministered in the entrance of the tent meeting. All this to say, these two verses, that is, to say that there were women who were dedicated to the tabernacle, who lived in perpetual virginity and celibacy, being single, and served at the tabernacle. Now, as we come back to Judges, the 11th chapter, by the way, I am not making a definitive case. I don't think there is a definitive case to be made, but I think there's a real good possibility here, is what we're looking at. So let's come back here, verse 34 of Judges 11. Then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances, and she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. Now, to this point, I think it's very easy to think that, He feels he has to take her life, right? Continuing on, 36. And she said to him, "My father, you've opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Amorites." So she said to her father, "Let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months, and I will go up and down on the mountains and weeping for my virginity, I and my companions." Now, here's my question. If she was to be put to death, do you release her for 2 months with her, not with her father to supervise, with her companions? And notice what she's weeping for. Her virginity. She's not weeping for the age of her virginity. And in fact, it goes on, at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gladite, 4 days in the year. Now, let me ask you something. If she died, are we lamenting the fact that she was never with a man? Doesn't that make a lot more sense if she lived in celibacy? That's what we're lamenting? It does to me, anyhow. And I think it's a lot more congruent with other scripture, that the human sacrifice always was seen as a horrific mark against the Israelites when they participated in it. And they did, unfortunately. The only exception to that is Abraham and Isaac. And again, he was prevented from that, in that the message, the imagery is very strong. The Lord provided a sacrifice, and it's to point to Jesus, that Jesus is going to save us, our inheritance, our children, through his son. So very, very different scenario than Jephthah. So I didn't give you a definitive answer because I'm not capable of that. But at least there's another option there, and I think, in my mind, evidence leans more that direction. Jeff?
Numbers chapter 30, verse 2, if a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth.
Yes.
And that's the Old Testament way.
Yeah.
I think he had to I hope he found a way out and it was acceptable.
Well, I don't think it was a way out. I don't think it's a way out at all. He offered her to God.
But he sinned against them and tried to make it, I don't know. Fine line.
Yeah. So, to be clear, I think what he did was he did offer her to God, just as he had vowed. The point is that offering a child to God was very different than offering a lamb to God. The lamb was killed and used as a burnt offering. Samuel and others were offered to God by giving to service of the tabernacle. So I think that's that. And even with that, whether he did or did not kill her, Jeff, I don't know for certain. But I do feel strongly that even after he made the vow, if it did mean kill her, that God did not demand that of him. The reason being, you read that verse from Numbers 30, right? But that there's nothing to indicate that that verse is more important than the verses against killing. You see what I'm saying? So, I personally, I'm strong in the point that God didn't require him to kill her. I'm not so strong that he didn't kill her. So, all that, and Ernie's not here. But it did occur to me, over the years, it's been a point of interest for me and a point of interest for so many others. And I thought, we just went right through that. It's interesting enough and useful enough to come back and to look at that. So I hope that's helpful. Probably create more questions than answers. Sherry.
It's a good example of why in the New Testament it says, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yes. Oh, and you know what? To Jeff's point too, your point, Jeff, that's a good point. So, it's James, right? I'm fairly certain that's James, the end where he says, above all, do not swear. Let your yes be yes and your nay be nay. One of the things they were doing was finding loopholes, that is the context of that. And I think, Jeff, you were kind of getting at that. And the idea was that you are to be honest. Your yes be yes and your nay be nay. A similar verse to that is Psalms 15. There's only 5 verses in Psalm 15. One of the verses is, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. So just because you make a promise, and Sharon's getting at this, that we as Christians are supposed to let our yes be yes and our no be no. That's the end of verse 4. Who swears to his own hurt and does not change. The fact that I'm uncomfortable fulfilling my vow or my promise or what I said is not criteria to get out of it. Thank you. That'll be the only time tonight.
Read it.
Sure, go for it.
But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation.
Anything else?
World today.
Oh, wouldn't it be a different world? That's a good way of putting it. Rita.
It reminds me of people who say, God, if you let this happen, I'll do this, and then they walk away from it.
Yeah.
Yet they promised God something.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it all the time in the hospitals, right? I do. If God gets me through this, I will, right? And all the time, absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't something back then that we don't deal with today. So, all right, as we get into, get into Judges 13, we're going to deal with another vow. And so we will look at that. Would someone like to read verses 1 through 7 of Judges 13 for us? The people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, the tribe of Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren, and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, behold, you shall conceive a son and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink or eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Right, allow me to pause and go back, because the point came out here that I introduced and never finished back there before. If you're asking why Jephthah may have lamented so much his daughter going to the temple, his entire inheritance and his lineage from his property from his family would have depended on her. She was his only heir, right? And that's how all the inheritance, the division of the land that we saw back in Joshua, was based on. And the reason that made me think of it here is there's instinctual, there's biological reasons that people yearn for children. All those still exist today, at least until you have a handful of toddlers running around the house, right? Then the yearning goes away for a little while at least. But all those things still exist today. Additionally, someone who was barren at this time, a couple like these two, Manoah and Zorah, would have had no inheritance, no one to give their land to and keep it in their family. So the angel of the Lord comes to Manoah's wife and tells her that she's going to have a child, right? You're going to have a child. Not only that, but that she was to take certain precautions. We'll talk about those precautions in a moment. According to verse 5, why? Yeah, the child is going to be a Nazarite. Now, number 6 that we went to unintentionally earlier describes the vow of Nazarite, and I encourage you to look at that and to understand that. Here's the part that I had difficulty understanding. When I hear Nazarite, I think of Nazareth, right? And I'm not a Hebrew expert by any stretch of the imagination. I struggle mightily with the English language. So this passed me, and all the names, or most of the Hebrew names, have meanings. Well, Nazir, N-A-Z-I-R, is the root of this vow. It means to be segregated, to be separated, or consecrated, to be separate. The Nazirite vow was a vow, in most cases, that people took willingly. In fact, number 6 describes a willing engagement in this Nazirite vow. The purpose was to wholly and completely dedicate yourself to God for a period of time. And it was for a period of time in number 6. It concluded with a specific sacrifice at the end of the given time. So they would engage in all these restrictions to separate themselves for God or to God until the end of the vow, which, as I just stated, ended with a specific sacrifice. Now, Samson's a little bit different in that this prophecy is giving to his mother, and his mother is told to abide by at least many or several of the restrictions, right? She is, verse 4, to have no wine or strong drink. The word wine oftentimes is ambiguous in the Hebrew language. It can mean alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And it seems to me that, I don't know this for certain, but it seems to me that it's likely the ambiguous term here because it's wine or juice or strong drink. And then when he comes back and talks later, he includes, you're going to have no fruit of the vine or nothing from the vine. So it's alcoholic and non-alcoholic drink from the vine. That's the restriction ultimately given to her. It's more clear the second time he says it. So you're to have no drink from the vine, and you are to eat nothing unclean. And when he's born, no razor shall touch his head, for he's going to live as a Nazarite. Questions or comments?
Now, his mom and dad, they were Nazarites, were they?
No. So I think you are struggling with the same thing I oftentimes struggle with, where you're connecting the Nazarite vow to Nazareth. But the Nazarite vow, Nazar means separate from. So this did not mean they were from Nazareth. It was a specific vow they took. Of course, Samson's not taking a vow, it's just put on. Yes. Yep.
Like this?
No, I don't believe so. I'm pretty certain he was not. John the Baptist appears to be. The way he lives appears to be. Now, and some of those things for John are prophesied before he was born, much like Samson here. For the normal Nazarite vow, it wasn't a lifelong vow. It was for a period of time.
It says here, fresh grapes and raisins, nothing.
Oh.
In number 6.
Oh, okay, number 6. So they were to have nothing from the vine, not just juice. No grapes or raisins. Wow. That'd be hard when you're watching the grapes. John and Janice aren't with us tonight, but Stephanie and Russ, of course, bought Janice's house, and they have an arbor in the backyard with all these grapes I've been eyeing up. I just can't wait. They are going to have visitors. So not even the grape or the raisin. They're nothing from the vine. Great additions to what we're talking about. Anything else? I think we have time for one more passage here. And I didn't silence my phone. I did now. Starting in verse 8. And Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, please let the man of God whom he sent come again to us and teach us what we are to do with the child who is to be born. Now I want to pause here. It seems really interesting that the angel went to her, not him, and he says, I want to hear it for myself. You know, it's like her word's not good enough. And we see a trend here, with Mary, the announcement being given to Mary versus Joseph. But he asked, would you send the angel back? Would you send the messenger back? And the messenger comes back, but he returns the second time to her, not him. But at least this time he gets to be in on the conversation. And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. Verse 10. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me. And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, Are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now, when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life, and what is the mission? And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink or eat any unclean thing. All that I commanded her, let her observe. And we're going to pause there for next week. A couple of interesting points that I think are useful, applicable for us today. So Manoah runs out to meet him, and he says, listen, tell me about his life. What's he going to be like? What's his mission in life? What's the angel tell him? You do what I told you to do. Wow. So strong in life, especially our spiritual walk, right? Do what I told you to do. You stay focused on that. Strong lesson. And of course, there's implications of faith there, right? The definition of faith, I think, is tied right up into that lesson that's given. Questions or comments? Sharon?
Yeah, at least he believed that there was going to be a child. I mean, his wife was barren, so he did believe.
Yeah, that's a good observation. There's an enormous amount of faith from the very beginning here, isn't there? Yeah. So, great observation. Quite frankly, I had overlooked. So, anything else? Thank you for your time. For those of you with us online, we're in just about 2 or 3 minutes, we'll be having a short devotional. Please stay with us.